Okay, I'm excited. We're starting a new series today. It's been a while since we've done this. So this one is Unveiling Lazarus in Mark's Gospel. This is episode one, the introduction. And yes, first of all, we should be seeing Jesus everywhere in Scripture. However, Lazarus is also making cameo appearances throughout the Gospels. And the focus of this series, we're going to show that these appearances of Lazarus are even more prominent in Mark than in the other synoptics. And we're also going to discuss possibly why that is so. So the big presupposition that I have here is that Lazarus is the beloved disciple that wrote the fourth gospel, except for the last chapter. We can talk about that later. But again, big presupposition. If you don't believe that Lazarus is the beloved disciple, you're really probably not going to enjoy this series. So if you're interested in this, sounds new to you, you can check out the playlist that we had for our series, John or Lazarus, who wrote the fourth gospel. You can check that out on this channel. Again, we believe here that Lazarus is the beloved disciple. And that's what's going to link all of this stuff together with Lazarus and the first gospel as well. Okay, so future episodes, what we're going to do is look at people who show up in Mark's gospel or in the first gospel here. We have the rich young ruler. You have the naked young man in the garden. We have a man carrying a pitcher of water before the disciples go to the Last Supper. And then we also have the beloved disciple at the Last Supper. And there's possibly many more people, or maybe a few more people that may actually be appearances of Lazarus in the gospel. And again, Mark's take is unique and it points to Lazarus more so than any of the other synoptic gospels. So just kind of stepping back here, authorship consensus, most believe that Mark is Peter's account of the life of Jesus. The reason we believe that it's Peter's account is that they have something called the Petrine Inclusio, which means, Peter is the first disciple mentioned in Mark's gospel, and he's also the last. And then all of the stories, pretty much Peter dominates the narrative throughout the Gospel of Mark. This has been recognized by many people. So the question is, did Mark really pen it or not? I'm not sure about that, and I don't know how certain anyone can be of that. But I do have a theory that might explain the prominence of Lazarus in Mark's Gospel. I have a theory here that the Gospel of Mark is both Peter and Andrew's account of the life of Jesus. You don't have to believe that, but I think it helps into explaining what's going on in the gospel and why we see Lazarus everywhere. And on the left side, like I said, why might Mark be interested in sprinkling hints of Lazarus throughout his gospel? In my mind, I'm just picturing it here, not just Peter dictating the gospel and someone writing it for him, but it would make sense that both Peter and Andrew, brothers, would sit together and write or to tell the story of Jesus, whether or not they're writing it or someone else is. And also, very important, Andrew and Lazarus, they were buddies, they were they were disciples of John the Baptist in the beginning chapter of the fourth gospel. And in the end of the fourth gospel, they also show up there as they were having breakfast by the sea, the fishermen and the famous 153 fish there. So in my mind, Peter and Andrew telling that gospel, they would want to include these hints of their friend Lazarus in the gospel that they're dictating. And I have another theory here. You don't have to believe this, but my theory is that Andrew wrote the last chapter of the fourth gospel. I talk about that back in that playlist for the John or Lazarus series. And just in my mind, I think it's kind of fitting, or how fitting would it be if Andrew penned what this gospel we call the Gospel of Mark, and then he also wrote the last chapter of the fourth gospel. He kind of got that's an inclusio in itself. And it's interesting that as Andrew writes that, if he wrote that last chapter of the fourth gospel, that his last statement is, there are many other things Jesus did. And I suppose that, the world itself could not contain the books that would be written, if all these things were written. It's interesting if he had written the first gospel and the last, he kind of includes that and makes a statement about all these books. But again, that's just side stuff here. So another question comes up. Why hide the name of Lazarus and the fact that he was raised from the dead from the synoptic gospels? It's kind of weird, right? So just looking online, I mean, there are some excuses people have for this or possible reasons. It's protective anonymity, and a similar one is timing of the gospels. If the synoptics had recorded the miraculous raising of Lazarus, it would have exposed him and his family to danger from Jewish authorities who sought to kill him because he was taking many people away from going to the temple and now believing in Jesus. Again, timing is similar. They might have chosen this to protect him until everything kind of settled down. Another theory, I'm just throwing this one out there. Maybe Peter and Andrew, being their friends, they knew that Lazarus himself would write a gospel. Therefore, they let him tell his story from his own perspective. Again, these are possibilities. But anyway, I think we're ready to begin here. So look for future episodes soon. My plan, God willing, is to start with the rich young ruler, and then we'll have maybe one episode each for all of these sightings of Lazarus. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, let me know. And until next time, contend earnestly for the faith which was once for all delivered to the saints, and God bless.